Gotcha.
So Ward was going to introduce me, but I think I'll just introduce myself. So that's 33 weeks of my life. Let's switch it to the overhead, Ward. So like you, I am a student. That was my last year's project for my master's degree, which I'm working on. See if I can get this work here. Okay. And, oh, cool. So I'm Duane Luce, and I'm a senior art director at Electronic Arts Los Angeles. And like I said, I'm working on my master's degree at night, in the dark. And that project just about killed me. I started last year about this time and did storyboards and production design and spent the summer modeling it and getting the grayscale layout all done. And then the fall was all rendering and visual effects and compositing, and finished it before Christmas. And it turned out pretty good. Those Martian Border Patrol agents have a tough life, especially with the Venusians. So Ward, good friend Ward Mikelski, that I've known for many years, colleague and a friend of mine, and invited me to come out here and speak to you, and I'm very happy that he did. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here today. And I have a question, and that's on the screen. It's, so you want to be, a digital artist, and part of that question is also directed at trying to get you to think about what that's going to take. What are you going to have to give up to actually do that? And my experience is that you can have anything that you want in life, anything at all. If you can imagine it, you can have it, but you're going to have to give something up to get it. So part of the equation of becoming an artist, a digital artist or an animator in entertainment or in the world that we work in, is part of the equation is sacrifice. And that sacrifice looks like different things to different people. For me, last year it was sleep. I sacrificed sleep and sacrificed time with my family, which is not always the best equation. But in order to get my master's degree, I have to spend time and not getting sleep. So I like this quote by a guy named Del Coates. I started my career working at General Motors design staff down in Warren, Michigan. And I studied product design, industrial design in school. And about that time, which was 1979, 1980 time frame, computers were just starting to be used in design, CAD, computer-aided design, and that kind of stuff. And Del Coates, who was a educator at Center for Creative Studies in Detroit, came up with this quote that a fool with a computer is a more dangerous fool. And I've always loved that quote. And the reason I love it is it's true. If you, and the meaning will become clear as we go through our presentation tonight. The other thing is, if you have any questions as we go along, just raise your hand, and I'd like this to be a little bit more of a dialogue. It doesn't have to be me up here, just speaking at you. The other aspect I want to talk about tonight is the soul of the artist. What does it mean to actually be an artist, digital or otherwise? And I have this sense, after having been a production artist for almost 30 years, that my creativity doesn't come from me, right? I'm not the source of the creativity. Other people put it different ways, but I think of myself as a tube through which the creativity comes. The Native Americans call it the hollow bone theory, that all inspiration and creativity and creation comes through a person if they're hollow enough to actually allow it to come through. And the sense of what creativity is and artistic endeavor just continues to amaze me as I grow as an artist. 30 years in my second career, first as an industrial designer and now as an entertainment artist. I'm always surprised at where ideas come from, and I ask myself, where do they come from? And it's, I don't have an answer except to say that somehow it comes through us and not from us. We're not the source. I always love this quote by Pablo Picasso, is that computers are not the answer, right? They're just another set of crayons that we use to express ourselves. And we have this joke about the make it pretty button, in computers. I don't know if you've heard that or not, but just because you're using a 3D program does not necessarily mean that you're going to make something look three-dimensional. That doesn't just happen by mistake or happen because you're using the program. Your real power as an artist is if you're going to be able to bend that software to your will, to your artistic vision. And that artistic vision doesn't come from a computer. It comes from your mind and your soul and your experience and the stories that you're trying to tell. In our culture today, and I've written a couple of articles on what I call the death of imagination. With the amount of visual media that we're bombarded with, it actually has an effect on our ability to imagine. So when you read a book and you read the words on a page, your mind begins to form an image in your visual cortex. It's called the part of your brain that's kind of the midbrain, and it has the visual cortex in it. And then that image that begins to form starts to interact with two other parts of your brain. One's called the neocortex, which is kind of the thin gray lining, the one that's all like gooey and crenellated all over your top of your brain, and then also interacts with your reptile brain, which is back here someplace, your brainstem. So the neocortex is responsible for higher order reasoning. So when that image begins to form in your mind, after having read those words in a book, that image jumps up to the neocortex and it tries to form an opinion about what that means. And then that opinion jumps down to your reptile brain, which is where your reactions come from, your seat of your emotions. And it decides how you're going to react to it. So if you you're reading a story about rattlesnakes and about somebody falls into a pit of rattlesnakes, and your neocortex starts to say, you know what, that'd be really dangerous and pretty icky, and then bungee jumps down to your reptile brain, and it goes like, you start to feel fear, you start to imagine what that would, feel like, and this bungee jump that happens between the midbrain, the neocortex, and the reptile brain is what imagination is. It starts to form that image, and you start to imagine what that is. Well, interestingly enough, when we have visual media where nothing is left to the imagination, it actually bypasses and short circuits that bungee jump. So you get force-fed what the image is. You not only get force-fed what the image is, but you get force-fed what the image means. And there have been a lot of studies done by social anthropologists about how that is actually killing our imagination. I actually ran into this when I was teaching industrial design at Cal State Long Beach and MIT and Rhode Island School of Design. I would ask my students to close their eyes and try to imagine something. I give them an imagination assignment, and I ask them to draw it. And by and large, many of the students had problems actually trying to form an image in their minds. And so we spent a lot of time doing exercises to get their imaginations back engaged. So when you take visual media, and I call it the explicit addiction, when you take that into your brain and you become addicted to more and more explicit visual media, you're actually killing your imagination. And in our society today, we can see that in a lot of different ways. For instance, when the Twin Towers were destroyed, there's a lot of people said, I can't believe it's real. It's it's a Hollywood special effect, and it really reduces our ability to imagine and also to believe what we're seeing. Frank Borman, who was one of the astronauts that in the Apollo program when the what was it, Apollo 11 that had the fire? Apollo, was it 1? It was way early, right? Can't remember the time, but in his testimony before Congress, kind of a what happened kind of testimony, he said these words, that it was a failure of imagination, that they never conceived that all the stuff that they were thinking about that were contingencies for things that would happen in space, they never realized it could happen like right at home. And I feel like after looking back 30 years that we're verging on an addiction to explicit media where everything's force-fed to us, and we are on the verge of our imaginations failing. So we tried an experiment with our own family, and in 1994 we turned TV off. We don't have cable or broadcast TV in our house. We have DVDs and we have movies and things like that we like to watch. And so consequently, my little girls who have grown up without TV in the house, except for we buy old TV shows like Alf and MASH and all that kind of stuff. And so my kids have grown up watching these classic TV shows. My daughter, Mackenzie, who is 6 years old, just tested out reading on a 8th grade level. She's in kindergarten. And my daughter, Savannah, tested out as a junior in high school. She's 11. Now, I don't say that to brag, although I am bragging. They've learned to read and enjoy books. I mean, Savannah's 11. When she was 9, she'd read all the Harry Potter books that were out there and had read every, they call them advanced reading book. They have these programs, and, if you do 40, you have to do 40 points in a year. And I think at the end of the year when she was in that grade, which was 2 years ago, she had like 340 points or something like that. You cannot be an effective artist if you cannot imagine, and you cannot use your brain to and engage that imagination. So this is the explicit addiction. With more and more explicit media out there, it's harder and harder actually to get the same result, right? So if you think about why Alfred Hitchcock's movies were so suspenseful, why were they so suspenseful? Speak up. Yeah, it's what you couldn't see that scared you. All that tense and that build up, and he left a lot to the imagination, right? So you hear the violins, you see the knife go up and you see the blood run down the drain, but you never see the person getting eviscerated and stabbed. A lot left to the imagination. And now there's I think Disturbia is out. Anybody seen that? Which is a remake of Rear Window, which was an old Alfred Hitchcock movie. Very suspenseful. When the explicit imagery is provided and kind of force-fed into your brain, and nothing is left to the imagination anymore, your imagination will die. So what's our task as artists? As artists, it's our first task is reclaim our own imagination, right? And I call it the sun and moon theory, where the sun is a source of light and the moon is just reflecting like about 10% of the light of the sun. So most students I see are moons. They're reflecting the light of some other artist that has done, kind of amazing work. So when I see a lot of like goblins and gremlins and buxom, Dungeons and Dragons babes and all that kind of stuff, what that is to me, that's a moon concept, because that's been done a long time, not only in D&D, art before there was Blizzard, but definitely it's been defined by Blizzard. So the task there is to engage your imaginations and try to be a source of light and not just a reflection of light that somebody else is doing. And the way you do that, I sat in today, I think it was on your presentation where you were talking about Norse mythology, and you're tapping into these archetypical kind of stories and iconography that are universal. And then you can put your own spin on it, put your own imagination on it, do it in a way that reflects who you are as an artist, and then it becomes something new that's worthy of devotion, right? So Matt Groening, you know who Matt Groening is? Created The Simpsons and Futurama and all this kind of stuff. I think it was about 2001 or something. He wrote an article in Wired magazine, and he talked about building a universe worthy of devotion, worthy of the devotion of your audience, and worthy of the devotion of those that you create the art for. Does that make sense to you? That's what you're about. You want to create a world where people want to come back, more and more every day. I mean, that's what World of Warcraft is, right? I will not play that game because I will get addicted, and I don't have time to be derailed right now. And that's what that's what sacrifice is. Now, if it comes down to a choice of doing that one extra thing, on a piece of artwork and going and playing World of Warcraft, and you make the choice to go play World of Warcraft, you're not ready to actually to step up to the plate to be able to compete in the world of entertainment as an artist, because you're not willing to sacrifice to actually make it happen, right? I see somebody applauding back there. So what is the cure for this explicit addiction? You know who Alberto Giacometti is? Very famous sculptor. I love this quote, that the object of our art is not to reproduce reality, but it's to make a new reality that's of the same intensity, right? Synthesize something new. So it's not good enough just to copy or to try to make something photoreal, although that's really important to learn the technique of that. But if you just do that, then you're missing something, right? You're just back into the same thing of feeding addictive imagery into the minds of the people that are your audience. So my job as an artist, is to create something new that's of equal or greater intensity. Something I've synthesized, that I'm created from the ground up. Albert Einstein, I don't know if you've ever read any of his writings, his personal writings. They're amazing. And I love what he said, about our experience as human beings, that the most fundamental thing we can experience is the mysterious, is not knowing. And the wonder of that is, it stands at the cradle of true art and true science. He who does not know it and can no longer wonder is as good as dead, a snuffed out candle. And that's true. If you think about, again, going back to all the visual art that we're bombarded with every day, when was the last time you felt that childish sense of wonder? Wow, look at that. That's so cool. Or your friends, right? When was the last time you saw that childlike sense of wonder in your friends? I'm lucky to have children, and I love being around my daughters because everything is new. Especially, Savannah's almost like a teenager now. Actually, she is. She's 11, going on 19. And Mackenzie is just every day it's something new. So we got these birdhouses, and I put them on pulleys so that we could pull them way up in the branches, because we have this cat that's a predator and kept bringing birds in the house that he would catch. Bird feeders. And we put them on pulleys so that the little girls could go out and lower them and feed the birds. And we got 30 birds in our yard every day eating that. And it's just, when they look out and they see the bird feeders gone or empty, they go out and they fill it up. And it's wow, that's so cool. Look at all the birds. And they're just amazed at, all of that. So part of what your task is as an artist is to be able to create that sense of wonder for people to go, wow, that's really cool, and they want to come back again and again and experience the world that you've created through the art and through your talent as an artist. So do you still want to be a digital artist? Good, we'll go on. So meme is the word. Do you know what this term is, meme? The meme was coined by a social anthropologist named Richard Dawkins. And Richard Dawkins did a lot of study on ideas as viruses. And so he defines a meme as a mental virus. And it's how information gets propagated from one person to the next. So if you think about things like Star Wars, you know who he is, right? So in an article that Bill Moyers did with George Lucas in Time magazine about 6 years ago, I think it was about 6 years ago. When did this first episode 1, come out? Four or five, 6 years ago. Anyway, he asked George Lucas, how did you come up with the look for Darth Maul? And George Lucas, who is a student of Joseph Campbell, and Joseph Campbell is a social anthropologist that his books are The Hero with 1,000 Faces, The Hero's Journey of Myth and Men. He talks about the hero's journey, and Star Wars is the quintessential hero's journey story construction. Call to action, the mentor that guides the descent into the ordeal, and then the return with a boon for mankind. That's the archetypical story structure of one of the great structures that are out there. So he asked, Bill Moyers asked George Lucas, well, how did you come up with the imagery for Darth Maul? How did you come up with that design? He said that they looked through all the icons or images of evil that were cross-cultural. So they looked in China and Europe and the United States and American Indian and Eskimo. They went everywhere. And they said they came up with 3 things: tattoos, red and black, and horns. Right? And that's what they gave to their designers, and so that's what they created. So when we look at Oh, and yellow eyes too was part of it. So when you look at this guy Ray Parks, who plays Darth Maul, and you can see that imagery in there. So we know this guy's evil just by looking at him. That's a meme. You wouldn't even have to actually look or watch the movie to look at that image and say, that's an evil guy. I don't want to meet him, in a dark alley anywhere. And that's the kind of meme that Richard Dawkins was talking about. So when you learn how to tap into the basement of somebody's psyche by tapping into the memes that bind us all together, iconography of evil, iconography of good, iconography of anger, when you learn to create imagery that taps into those memes, then you have the ability actually to manipulate people at the core level. Now that sounds negative, doesn't it? Manipulation. But that's what we do as artists, is that we're actually reaching to somebody's heart and we're making them, we want to make them cry or laugh or hurl, Still want to be a digital artist? Okay, first things first. Education. Knowledge is the food of the imagination. You cannot have an active imagination unless you have knowledge in it and unless you feed it every day. So I don't care where it comes from. It can come from movies, it can come from books, it can come from personal experience or journeys or whatever, but you've got to have knowledge. Otherwise you will starve and your imagination will starve. And go back to Frank Borman said, is that your failure as an artist will not be a failure of technique, it won't be a failure of technology, it'll be a failure of knowledge and of an imagination. That will be where you will fail as an artist. You just couldn't imagine deep enough or wide enough or far enough of what could be possible. So, and the thing that will starve your imagination is if you don't feed it with knowledge, kind of every day. One of the things I ask artists all the time when I interview them is, what do you like to read, and what was the last book that you read? And I don't hire people that don't read books. That's just my personal prejudice. Some people don't hire people because of who they are or their background or color or creed or whatever. But for me, it's ignorance. I will not hire an ignorant person. So if you come to me with great portfolio, all these great drawings, and you don't read or you don't watch, great movies, you're not a student of the craft, and you're not feeding your imagination with something, I don't hire those people. Because I find them to be egotistical and to think that they think they know all the answers. Whereas people that are questing, just like the games we love to play, we're questing for something, we're questing for knowledge. Those people are the people I want to be around because they stimulate my mind. They hold a standard out there that says, I'm on a journey. I'm on a journey of knowledge and understanding and to create, something that's great. And I'm not going to settle for anything less until I achieve it. Ed Catmull, who might be familiar to some of you. Anybody know who Ed Catmull was? Raise your hands. Sort of. You heard of him. You've heard that name before. Where have you heard that? Anybody use 3D Studio Max? You ever use the Catmull ROM shader in 3D Studio Max? It's in there. It's in one of those little drop-down menus. That's a hint. Ed Catmull was one of the founding members of Pixar. Right. He's a computer scientist. So Ed Catmull, in an article in, I think, CG magazine or CG Artist magazine or something like 4 or 5 years ago again, Tad Greenwald asked Ed Catmull and 2 or 3 other kind of heroes of and grandfathers and fathers of our industry, what's the most important skill that a digital artist needs today? What do they need to know? And this is what Ed Catmull said. He said, you need fundamental art and science skills. And I'm going to read this because it's important. I usually don't like people that just sit up here and read their PowerPoints. In fact, I don't usually like people that have PowerPoints, but it helps. Fundamental art and science skills: drawing, color, composition, lighting, study of motion. Every studio encounters people who think they can become an artist without developing those skills. Wrong. And that's my experience too. People that are just computer artists, just know the tool, are fools with a computer. Now, if you don't want to be a fool, then you got to do this stuff, right? When I was in school as an industrial designer, one of the things we learned how to use is magic markers, and we did a thing called rapid viz. So we would draw, with pencils and markers, and we'd draw cars and products and people, and the emphasis was on rapid visualization, because we used to just try to paper the walls with ideas, get as many ideas out as possible. And we had an assignment one time in our class, and this was my very first year in design school, and the assignment was to draw a hubcap, and we were trying to be able to see the graphic reflections of the graphic patterns of reflections in a chrome object. Why would we want to do that? Because surface reflections indicate what the three-dimensional form of the surface is, right? So if you know how to draw it, and you can predict how those, the horizon and cars and stuff and the fire hydrant and the trees, all that's going to, be distorted by the form, then you can start to understand two-dimensionally what the three-dimensional form of an automotive piece is, whether it's hubcap or a side of a car or whatever. So we all struggled with that, and I think I went to a Kmart parking lot, and I sat in front of several hubcaps and just drew what I saw. I started to see things in reflections that I'd never seen before, like myself, drawing myself in the hubcap. It was a revelation, and I was excited. I brought my drawing back, and everybody had kind of a similar experience. There's like 20 of us. We all put our drawings up on the wall, and then one guy brings up his drawing, and it was just this circle, and it was all covered in with a silver pencil. To him, chrome was a silver pencil. You just colored the circle with a silver pencil. He didn't see or perceive that, what the actual thing was in reflection. So, and I call them silver pencil artists. So John Dykstra, anybody know John Dykstra? So John Dykstra is like 7 feet tall. He made his name in the original Battlestar Galactica. He designed the Battlestar. He was a special effects artist. Amazing. He's one of the fathers of our industry, visual effects guy. He now works at Sony ImageWorks. He's worked on pretty much every cool movie you can imagine. And this is what he said to the answer, what do students need to know? Artists and animators need to have a first-hand acquaintance with reality, a tactile, visual, auditory immersion in real things, in order to have a sense of what things are and what emotions they evoke in their raw form. You need to know why light bounces off differently off glass versus cloth. You need to know and understand how a giraffe moves versus a hippopotamus versus a snake versus a human. You need to understand the real thing. Remember what Giacometti said, it's not our job as artists isn't to reproduce reality, but to create a new reality of equal or greater impact. The only way you can do that is if you understand how real things work to begin with, and then you can imagine things beyond that. And that's one of the fundamental problems today in artists that I see coming through, is they don't understand the reality of something. So for instance, an explosion, right? So I see explosions start from a little white hot center and then grow over a few frames like this, and then they become these big fireballs. When in fact, an explosion, because it's moving at 10,000 feet per second, the shock wave, is that first frame after you kick the explosion off needs to be this big, right? It doesn't go boom, it goes blam, and then goes out from there. If you want to have impact in your explosions, hit that first frame with something that's already fully formed, because that's how an explosion forms, right? It's moving so fast there is no way, except with a high-speed camera running at about 600 frames per second, to actually capture that shock wave that's moving at 10,000 feet per second. So the other thing that John Dykstra said, in order to have a sense of what things are and what emotions they evoke in their raw form. So he's saying tap into the emotions of people, and the only way to do that is to understand the reality of things. Go back to memes, how we share information, how we infect each other with ideas. Does that make sense? So if you want to tap into the hearts and the minds of the people that you're creating art for, you've got to tap into memes and also understand how things are, how they really are. Is this going okay? You guys have any questions? Is this boring? So Phil Tippett, who started Tippett Studios, also one of the great fathers of our visual effects and animation, digital animation industry, says observation of the world around them, how they move in space, how light bounces off the surfaces, how things look and feel, and what the true relationships of things are. In a 2D medium like painting or drawing, a good artist will spend a lot of time out in the world observing and will bring that back to the studio. And that's what we need here as well. Go out there, look at how smoke moves, take video of it, replicate it. Go out and observe how animals walk. If we had time in a program, my wish was that everybody would go through a traditional hand-drawn animation section, because that would teach you how things move, or would help teach you how things move. So that brings us to the question, do I have to be able to draw to be a digital artist? So how many think you have to be able to draw to be a digital artist? How many think you don't? Just one? Two? Thanks for being honest. In my world, you do. And I'll tell you why. Is drawing at some level is a universal communication. So you're not just going to be working with other artists. We'll talk about that in a second. You're going to be working with producers and directors. And in the movie industry, art directors are actually not what I do. I'm an art director, but if I was in the movie industry, I would be called a production designer. So production designers are the guys that do all the cool concept illustrations and things like that. Art directors are, by and large, basically the bad ones are glorified set decorators. They just arrange the flowers, and the really good ones are actually also production designers. So in order to communicate with your client, with a producer or a director, you've got to have a visual language that allows you to communicate with them, and being able to draw is how you do that. So you all know the name Ridley Scott, right? So Ridley Scott's a degreed graphic designer, and he storyboards all his movies, and they call them Ridley Grams. And so he does these little thumbnail boards that he shows to his actors, and he shows to the production designer, this is the shot that I want, and et cetera, et cetera. So he visualizes and he uses drawing as a visual language. Now I don't care if it doesn't, if it's a napkin sketch. If you don't know how to draw, somebody who does will be feeding you imagery to make. That's just it. So it doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be great. You don't have to be the best drawer that's out there, but you've got to be able to visually communicate. If you don't, you are going to be missing a tool in your toolbox that will eventually hold you back. Delacroix said, the source of genius is imagination alone, the refinement of the senses that sees what others do not see or sees them differently. Your genius is that you have a point of view. You see things differently than other people. That's your gift as an artist. And the sooner you kind of embrace that superpower, the faster your acceleration and your growth as an artist will be. Because you see things differently. And it's that unique vision of how things are that is where your value as an artist is. I don't hire people as artists to work with because they're exactly the same as the 3 other people I just hired. I hire them because they're different, because they have a different point of view. We're all working on the same thing, and it's a synergistic kind of process. But at the same time, it's like I want that uniqueness. Everybody's got a little bit different point of view and a little bit different way of looking at things. And that's important. So containing the muse. The muse is where our ideas come from. And I've thought a lot about this. I don't know where my ideas come from. They show up. There's a really great book I would recommend that you read, and that's Stephen King's book on writing. It's kind of a memoir, but it talks about his creative process. It's paperback. You can buy it, pretty much anywhere. I would really recommend that you read it, because it talks about how he finds his stories, or how basically his stories find him. And he talks about it that it's almost like going in the backyard and you see this bright red end of a ribbon sticking out of the ground. And you go up to it and you start to pull on the end of the ribbon, and it starts to unwind, and pretty soon you're digging and you come down and it's a dead body because it's Stephen King. But, for us, it's like, okay, find that one thing and then just follow it. Follow that thread. That's where the ideas come from. That's where Speed Trap came from. It's like, okay, well, what if it was, I want to do something about Border Patrol, because I was getting so sick of hearing about illegal aliens, and and then I thought, well, illegal aliens. Well, aliens. I like aliens. Then I thought, well, what if it wasn't? What if it wasn't on Earth? What if it really was aliens and it was Mars? What if it was Border Patrol on Mars? So you just got to follow that thread and imagine, right? It's not that difficult to let your mind roam free. So where do ideas come from? How do I access the muse? How do I control the muse? Well, I don't know. I don't know where they come from. It comes when it wants to. Control is an illusion. You have no control. All you can do is prepare yourself with the tools. All you can do is put yourself in the way of catching the idea. I know this is that when ideas come, if you don't write them down, if you don't start that process, less and less ideas will come to you. It's like a dream, right? When you dream, I don't know if you've read this. I've tried it. There have been years when I've kept a dream journal, and it's like after about a month, I remember every dream that I have because I write them down. And some of them are pretty weird. Some of them I don't want to remember because. But you wake up and you don't know if you dreamed or not. You think you did, but you can't remember everything. Well, if you try the experiment of just a couple of weeks of keep a little book by your bed, and when you wake up, just immediately, just whatever you can remember, even if it's just one word, orange, write it down. And pretty soon, over the course of just a couple of weeks, you'll start remembering everything about that dream. The same way with ideas for concepts, right, or stories. I get mine driving my car, out in the backyard mowing the lawn, playing with my kids. I was walking through the airport yesterday, and it's just like I saw this guy. He was a TSA, and there was like one guy in the Grand Rapids, airport. There's just a very small TSA contingent versus Los Angeles International, where there's like, I don't know, hundreds of them. And I thought, well, what would it be like to be, a TSA guy on Mars with aliens? So, there's stories everywhere, and you just become a gatherer of stories. You have no control. The only thing I can do is honor the vision that's given to me. How do I honor that vision? I honor that vision by actually creating it. So when you get an idea, you've got to put it down. Now, you're learning production process, right? The 4 Ps, previs, develop the visual language and the fiction, then do prototype or develop the idea, put it into production, and then polish it. That's the way you can honor that muse. The first step is just writing it down. I like to storyboard things out a little bit. So the hats that you will eventually wear, some of you will wear some of these, some of you will wear others in production. These are all the different kind of things that you can do with your skills that you're developing. Cinematographer, painter, sculptor, animator, lighting designer, graphic design, computer scientist, sound designer, UI designer, on and on. There's so many different ways you can apply the basic art that you're learning here. But those are, doing one or more of those is not really the end goal of why you're doing your art. the truth of it is, if it was easy, if this was an easy path, anybody could do it. And I feel like it's been very rewarding to be in this career that I'm in, but it hasn't been easy. There are more talented people in this room than me right now. There's some of you that have raw talent just dripping from your pores, right? And I always hire people that are better than me. That's kind of an axiom of leadership, is always hire people that are better than you. And I work with some amazing artists. When I started in school in 1975 in university, I hadn't taken any kind of formal art training, and I was going to be an architect. And to be an architect, you have to study like an undergraduate degree, like civil engineering, to become an architect. And I was unfortunately born without the math gene, so I had a real problem with calculus and the fourth derivative being the shear strength of bolts, and this is like, I was bored. So I wandered in. I decided I was going to take a foundation class, and I did, a foundation art class. And I don't know if you guys do foundation here, Ward, sort of. Anyway, foundation course is basically 2 semesters of it's like a survey of every kind of art, ceramics, sculpture, drawing, painting, the whole thing. And all the students, no matter what discipline they're going to be in, go into that class, and you're all in there together. And my teacher happened to be the industrial design professor, and he invited the whole class up to his house that he had designed and built at the foot of a mountain, and it was just beautiful. And we went there like on a Sunday night, and the next day we were going to hike up the mountain. And he had this loft where he had his studio up in his house, and it was really amazing. So we went up in the loft, and he had this long table, and there were these drawings of a or big drawings of motorhomes that he was rendering for somebody. He was doing design for them, and I'm going, that's what I want to do. I want to do that. And I got real excited, but I had no skills. I had no art skills. I knew I could doodle, because I'd done that like forever, but I didn't know if I could. And I wanted to do that, and I kind of took him aside. I said, I really want to do that. And he said, okay, all right, that's cool. We'll see if we can get you there. And at the end of the semester, I went to him and said, I really want to be in the program. He says, well, your portfolio isn't all that great, but if you're willing to work hard, I'll give you a shot. And he gave me a shot, and made a career out of it, and did pretty well. Won some awards, and because somebody gave me a chance, right? So I don't have like all the most amazing raw talent, but I have 2 superpowers that very few people have. I work harder than anybody else I know, and longer. And I can work people under the table. I'll be going, and people are like, yeah, I can't see anymore. Come on, let's go. The other superpower I have, which I discovered when I was a kid, my brother, who made balsa wood airplanes, my older brother, had this box full of probably 7 or 8 broken balsa wood gliders. And I was 4 or 5, maybe 6 years old, and he was going to throw it out. I said, no, I want them. Because I'd seen him throwing the planes, and he would never let me play with them. So it's like, that was my chance. So I took pieces from 6 of those, and I made 1 glider that flew. So my superpower as an art director is I can look at anything, I can see where it's broken, I know how to fix it. Just gut feel. And that's how that with my work ethic is what has brought me to be an art director, right? Because I know exactly how to fix it. And along the way, I actually, became an artist that didn't suck either, And one of the reasons why I'm back in school now is because I feel alive as an artist, and I want to continue my development as an artist. So what do I look for in you as graduates of any program? I want to see cross-training in at least 3 core disciplines. So if you're an animator, I want to be able to see that you can do texture and lighting. If you're a texture artist, I want to see that you can do previs or one other thing. So think about yourself as being cross-trained in this. The premium right now is in artists that also have technical ability, either through scripting or coding, right? Those are highly paid and highly sought after positions. So if you have a technical bent, you take your artistic ability, put that with your technical and technology side of it, and you've got a great career ahead of you. So these are some of my drawings. I love to draw. That's the other thing too, is just find something that you love to do. I put these up because I draw like this all the time now. I just do these line drawings. And this is for Command & Conquer 3, which is a game that just came out. In 1984, a guy named Jordan Weissman called me up on the phone. He was a friend of mine. A friend of mine named Dave Dietrich introduced us. He said, "We're going to do this thing called Battle Tech, and can you draw robots or giant battle mechs, 30-meter tall tanks that are driven by pilots?" Anybody familiar with Battle Tech or battle mechs? So in 1984, I illustrated the first what they call technical readout, and I did 100 drawings in like a month and a half or 2 months, every night drawing. And I would put on earphones, and my son at the time, Casey, would come and sit by me and he'd watch me draw the robots. He thought that was really cool. And I would make Xeroxes, and he would color them. He was like 4 years old at the time. And so I had the earphones on, and I was like on my 60th drawing, and I was getting so sick of drawing these robots. I could not believe. And sometimes my hand would cramp up, and I'd have to stop. But every night I'd come home, and I'd sit there, and I'd draw those robots. And one night, about the 60th, like I said, the 60th, Casey nudges me, and I go, and I had my earphones on, I was listening to the music, and I looked over and I go, "What?" And he goes, "Dad, you're snoring." And I realized I had dropped so far into just this Zen kind of alpha state that I was like, it was like, oh my gosh. There's a book I recommend called Flow that talks about this phenomenon, and it's written by a guy with a very weird name. His first name is Mihaly, Mihaly, and then his last name is Csikszentmihalyi. I don't know if it's a Czechoslovakian name or something. But he also wrote another companion novel, or companion to that, called Creativity. So look up Flow and then Creativity. Those are excellent books that talk about getting into the flow of something. You can drop into an altered state, especially when you're doing something repetitive. And I've been able to actually, since that time, every time I'm doing some sort of intensive, long-term project, I've been able to drop into that place where my mind just kind of shuts down, and I'm in the flow of it, and I can create. And I love being in that place. And that's not a talent. It's just everybody's built that way. You've just got to find your own access into it, whether it's doing hundreds of drawings or shots, or your own movie or your homework. Anybody else have that experience where you're drawing and time, it's like you look at the clock and it's 9 o'clock, and then it's like 1 in the morning, and then it's like 4? That's flow. And that's what we can tap into that as artists. It's an altered state, right? Pretty cool stuff being an artist. This is an illustration I did for Command & Conquer. The ability to envision an entire world in context draws on a lot of different aspects of artistic endeavor. This is for a game. It's meant to be a screen from a prototype of what a game would look like. But there's lighting, there's animation, there's the story of it. What are these little guys down here on the bridge? What are they doing? And these guys up over here, and what are these spotlights here? And you can't see quite the whole picture, but it's and the game turned out looking a lot like that, which was really cool. to actually come up with a concept before anything existed and actually see that realized in a product. That's the cool part of going from here into something you can hold in your hands or you can play on a screen, and there's nothing like it. I remember the first time I saw my name in the credits of a movie, and I haven't done a lot of movies. I've done only 2 theatrical movies and 2 direct-to-video features, but there's nothing that can come close to sitting there with your family and your name comes up in the credits, and it's like at that point it's 4 feet tall, and all your kids go, "Yay, it's my dad!" It's cool. Yeah. That's actually overpainted on top of 3D. So it started out, everything you see there started out as grayscale, and then painted textures and effects, and all the effects are painted in, all the lighting effects. And so I use a program called View Despre to do my base. I model in 3D Max, import it into View Despre, get the lighting right, and do things like water and that kind of stuff. So I didn't paint the water. The water is actually a procedural 3D render, but then overpaint on top of that. And I've done all my conceptual work. Actually, let me show you a couple other pieces, if you guys are interested. Actually, so these are concept paintings from the second Bionicle movie that I worked on. These are actually just screensaver shots. This one was interesting because I actually turned this into a shot in the movie, and I'll show you what that looks like. So again, using the same process of creating layers and models in 3D Studio Max, bringing it in, and doing overpainting on top of it. In Photoshop. Yep. So let me get out of that, and I'll show you this. So this little movie, which is kind of low res, but you'll get the idea. Again, I did this in combustion. I cut it up into layers. The same shot, I just recolored it. And then, let's see if I can get that to play. Ish, loop. And then added the water and the birds flying through, and this became an establishing shot in the movie. Looks like it's going to chug there for a minute. All right. Anyway, fun stuff. But 2.5D, so layers and planes, doing the 3D camera moving, combustion, moving in, then putting the 3D elements of the birds flying through and the effects of the water and that kind of stuff. It was a lot of fun. So I did, when I was art directing this movie, I did 8 establishing shots, and I did the first 18 shots of the movie by myself. All right, let's go back to this. So all these things that you're going to do, animation, model, rigging, material and texture development, lighting, et cetera, these are all things that you're going to do on a daily basis, that you're going to create, to create your art. These are things that you're learning now. They're very important. They're the foundation. Those are your tools. And then there's companies out there that are like amazing companies, historic companies, legendary companies that all of us think, wow, I want to go work for those places. ILM, Pixar, Rhythm and Hues, Digital Domain, and then game companies like Electronic Arts and Activision and Ubisoft and Midway and Rockstar. Now, the interesting thing is, my experience is that they're about 0.5% of what your opportunity is, and Ward's going to say, where do you get those statistics at? And I'm going to say, I pulled them out of my, I can't say the word because, I don't want to have a Don Imus moment here, offend anybody. I did make up the statistic, but the truth of it is that the very small percentage of people in this room or in any room that are artists that are studying digital art are actually going to end up working at those places, either initially when they graduate or even over the course of their career. Because there's sacrifices that have to be made to actually go and work in places like that. First of all, you have to be so intensely good that I've spent the last 16 years in this industry. I'll never work at one of those places because I'm not good enough, frankly. I don't really care about it anymore. Because I've grown to the point where I don't care about another credit. My excitement and my reward in my work right now is either doing my own art like Speed Trap. Thank you. That was cool. Doing my own art like Speed Trap, or as an art director enabling other people to What happened? What happened?
I was running through spaces and over the top.
Are you okay?
Yeah, fine.
No blood? That's good. So my excitement as an artist right now is either doing my own ideas and telling my own stories, or actually seeing, mentoring, and helping other artists to achieve their own greatness. That's where I get all my enjoyment out of that right now. So the last team I worked on at Electronic Arts had a lot of lead artists that I worked with, and helped them to become in their own leadership. But the opportunity out there is just very small. In fact, most of you in this room will never work for one of these companies. It's not going to happen. Unless you really, really want to work there and you're single-minded enough to pursue it and to go after it, and that's all you want to do. And you're willing to make the sacrifices and spend the money, to continue to work, and you keep your eye on the prize. And when I was working at Capers with Creative Capers with Ward, there was a fellow, two guys actually. One of them his name was Ron Zorman. Do you remember Ron? Ron was our lead animator, and he was really good. And he spent nights and weekends doing animation tests, and just kept working on his reel. And he ended up going to Pixar, and he's one of the stars over there, one of their honcho animators. But the reality is that it's like the NBA. Most of us will never work for these companies. And that's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that your art can be bad. It has to be great. Not a little bit more percentage is in the second tier studios that are out there. And they're, for every ILM or Pixar or Electronic Arts or Activision, there are 10 Cafe FX or Tiger Hair Studios or Blur or Boy Wonder or Fuel or Asylum. Have you ever heard of these studios? Maybe Blur. Have you heard of Boy Wonder? Boy Wonder, who runs that? Burt Ward. He would play Robin in the original Batman TV movie. He took all his residual earnings and bought just massive amounts of SGI computers, and lives out in kind of Corona, close to where I live, and he basically does shots, for movies. That's what he does. Called Boy Wonder. But for every one of those big top names, Sony Pictures, ImageWorks, there's 10 boutique studios. So your chances are better if you want to do movies or entertainment. And the second tier game makers like Relic and Radical, which aren't so much second tier anymore, they're actually growing in there. Whereas 90% of the opportunity for you as a digital artist, where does it lie right now? And where will it lie in the next 5 to 10 years? Right? That's the question you want to ask. It's the 90% of the market, I believe, is in visualization for design, architecture, medical, scientific. If you want to make money and you want to have fun doing it and you want to be a digital artist, build a company around these things that does something very specific and I call that a convergence of trends. So if you look at your audience, the same people that are watching TV shows or watching movies or playing video games are watching commercials. Now, you know the trailers in the, or the, let's all go to the lobby, CG things that are at the beginning of, which some of them are like really horrendously bad. And they're actually getting better now. So they have, what was that one, Meet the Robinsons, and they had that singing frog one, and they're actually getting like, wow, that was pretty hip. Why? Because they're realizing that the people who are watching this are going, that sucks, I know it because I've seen all these other movies. That's not Pixar quality. And so our audience comes to expect that kind of quality in everything that they see, including, some of the most amazing commercials. How many of you have been on the Digital Domain website and look at the commercials that they've done? Just go there and just look at the commercials. They have them all out there. A lot of them done with Lightwave and 3D Studio Max, and they're just amazing. They're incredible little pieces of, amazing CG. So the convergence of trends is around 3 factors. And that visualization, first is technology, leveraging technology, understanding it. That includes scripting and coding and being up on the latest tools. That's one of your main pieces that you need to have, right? That's the tool that you'll use. You can't do this stuff on an Amiga anymore. The second convergence of trends is the entertainment value. So your dean, what's his name? Don Green, said he saw a commercial or he actually saw a speech by Bob Lutz, the head of General Motors, where he said General Motors is a art and entertainment company. And it's like, wow, I thought they made cars. But when you think about it, they are. It's like, why do you buy a car? Most of us for the style, that it fits. It creates a persona about who we think we are, projects that to the outside world so people can see it and go, oh, they're that kind of person. That's a Lexus guy. So there's an entertainment component to this convergence of trends, that the same people that are going to be watching the art we do are the same people that watch all those movies and TV shows and everything. So when we put something in front of them, we give them something that's going to entertain them. That's the second leg or second side of this triangle. The third triangle is the media and the art, the vision that we bring to it. So at the center of that is the story. So think about this as you go forward and complete your studies, and as you go forward as artists, it's all about the story. Everything you do is about a story. You name one thing, you can make it about a story. Make your stuff into story. So it's like, I've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of character turnarounds on a turntable. That's important to know how to do that. I think that's really cool. It's very important and necessary. But what's the story behind that, right? What story you're trying to tell? And I was talking to Corey today, and he's showing me some of the texture stuff and the camera tracking and putting the mech into the scenes, which is really cool and it looks good. He was asking me, what would you do that would be different? And I said, well, I wouldn't do anything different with that because I think it looks great. But what I would do is tie your hallway or your environment and then your computer and then your mech in another environment. I would tie that in together in some sort of little shot that would tell a story. Because fundamentally what the world needs out there and what the convergence of trends demands, if you're going to bring entertainment and the media and the art that you do and the technology, if you're going to bring that and apply it to something like medical visualization, you have to tell a story because that's what people are expecting, whether they know it or not. And Ward had a great example about style guides for product placement, like in Walmart. Well, they print these style guides or these point-of-purchase display guides that go out to their stores, and people, thumb through it, and they use it or they don't. They can't have consistency in their product placement. What if you gave them a game level said, walk through the store. This is where the stuff is. So there's a convergence of trends about communication that can be leveraged on top of all the stuff that you're learning. Now, some of you will, I gotta go do movies. I have to, and you'll go do them. And 15 movies, and 2 years later, you'll say, I gotta get out of this business because all I'm doing is skies, or I'm doing, the squirmy bits. When I went to General Motors in my first job, I went because I wanted to take advantage of the golden era of automotive design. I loved Sid Mead, and I wanted to do really cool spacey cars, flying cars, and when I got there, I realized that most of my job would be on a hubcap or a fender or a doorknob or a mirror, and doing the whole big car, that was reserved for guys who'd been there for 25 years. And all the action was happening in the advanced development studios, which you couldn't get into because that was like a very privileged position. And so for me to come in and go, I have all these really cool car designs, let me design. No, it's like you learn as you go. And so I left after a year and a half and didn't look back. I found out I like drawing cars more than I actually like designing them for a company. So some of you will be the same way. You'll want to, I got to do movies. Why? Because they are fun to work on. The people are great, and there's a great sense of satisfaction. But the majority of artists that I meet, and I look at their resumes, and it's like I worked a month at Rhythm Hughes. I worked 4 at Digital Domain. I went over to New Zealand and worked for 3 months on King Kong. Well, what'd you do on King Kong? Well, I did shader development for trees, or I did this one little piece. And they're just massive productions that you'll do a very small piece of. And that's okay, because it's good experience for you. But sooner or later, unless you rise to the top of the food chain in those places, you'll find that they become less and less rewarding. So as an art director at EA, we have a lot of people coming over from the movie industry saying, number one, I hate getting laid off every 4 months or 5 months or 9 months and having to wait 2 months for my next gig. And number two, I'm tired of doing sky replacement. I want to do something that's more challenging as an artist. So if you want an opportunity, the opportunity is here in this convergence of trends. So broaden your imagination. Use the same skills that you have and the same ability to tell story, but broaden your imagination. So you still want to be a digital artist? It's the moment of truth. So the fears, the questions. When I was a senior in school, and it was about this time of year, and I was the last one in the shop making my final mock-up, and I freaked out. It's like, I will never get a job. This is like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I called my professor, and I go, Doug, this is Duane. What? It's Duane. Doug, am I going to get a job? And he's like, Duane, you idiot. Yes, you'll get a job. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Yeah. And what do I need to do to get a job? So let's ask some questions. That's the end of my presentation. Questions? Chirp, chirp.
So you said that when you came into when you started doing the drawing stuff, that you weren't very good at drawing, or that you were pretty much like a natural artist, or you have to work hard to do that?
I'm not a natural artist. I am not at all. And even today, it takes, it's just been in the last 4 or 5 years. I'm 54 this year. It's been the last 4 or 5 years where I've actually conquered my fear of drawing, like the figure, for instance. Let me show you this. No. Bear with me. So this is from my advanced painting class that I took last quarter. I show this to you because I'm at that point where I was always afraid to put figures in my art. So it was naturally, because I'm an industrial designer, I naturally gravitated towards machines and buildings and that kind of stuff. That was easy. It was always been easy for me to do. But figures was always extremely difficult. Were always extremely difficult. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to earn a master's degree, because I felt like there were pieces and holes in my education and my ability as an artist that were holding me back from being able to tell stories. So I don't care if I'm the best animator, and I don't look at Speed Trap and think, wow, that's like the most amazing animation ever, because it's not. It's a story. It's not meant to be like the most amazing animation ever. I think the visual effects are good. I think the lighting is great. I think the color palette is cool. I think the concept is cool. But I'm not going to win an award for, ED coming up and going, gotcha. That's not amazing animation. But the story is cool, and the animation doesn't suck. Does it make sense? So I just need to hit this bar where it can't suck, and then I can do great things, and I call it the nothing can suck bar, right? And then I can do great things above that speak to my strengths, right? So my focus in my MFA is storytelling. So I don't care if I'm like the most amazing artist. It just can't suck, right? So somewhere along the way, and I am a very good